Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. I first want to acknowledge our singers and our dancers for bringing in the grand entry. It's great to hear the drum early in the morning and helping us come together in a good way. I also want to acknowledge the pipe carrier for his prayers and for helping to support the conference. My name is Thomas Benjoe. I'm the President and CEO of FHQ Developments. I'm also a proud member of Muscowpetung First Nation, and I'm currently the Chair of the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce. What I'm going to do today is I'll go through my presentation. I want to walk through partnerships in Indigenous engagement, creating more impactful relationships between non-Indigenous business and our communities and nations. What I will ask is that if there are any questions, please just put that into the chat function in the live stream, and I'll try to answer your questions towards the end of the presentation. So I guess where to start? FHQ Developments, we've been established since 2010. We are owned by the 11 nations of the File Hills Qu'Appelle Tribal Council in beautiful Treaty 4 territory. And we represent 5 linguistic groups or tribes in this territory: the Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, Saulteaux, and Cree. And we also represent 16,000 plus citizens within our territory. So very, very proud of our communities and the work that we do to create greater economic livelihood for them. Inside of our organization, we're actually split into 3 divisions. So we have our investments and partnerships, which is focused primarily on creating business opportunities, either through acquisition, investment, or through partnerships created with various organizations that help to give us capacity as an organization to be able to do the work necessary within the market. The second division that we have is we have an economic development division, which actually focuses on how do we build the Indigenous business ecosystem around us as we have success from a corporate perspective. How do we ensure that we're bringing our nations, how do we ensure that we're bringing our citizens along with us in that journey and try to create opportunity for them as well. And there's also a lot of work around training and advocacy and the development of resources to help our communities strengthen their positions in business. Now, the third division for our organization focuses on Indigenous HR solutions. And so Tokara HR Solutions is our company, and they're focused on trying to ensure that we grow our Indigenous people vertically. And so that, we're not just creating an opportunity just to participate, but we're actually trying to move people in their careers and trying to develop them into the leaders that we know they are. And so we work with a number of organizations where we try to put that talent to work, or we're putting that talent to work within either FHQ Developments or our companies that we've created over the years. So that is the structure in which we've developed our development corporation over the years. In our history, if we were to take a step back in why we created the development corporation in the first place, there's 3 things we are trying to focus on as an organization. One is Indigenous wealth. How do we build Indigenous wealth? And Indigenous wealth is different than wealth as we see it in Western terms. Wealth, in a Western definition of wealth is, how can I build wealth for myself? How can I build wealth for my family? And, what type of a legacy am I going to leave? Versus Indigenous wealth, which is what impact am I going to create for my community? What kind of livelihood are we going to create for our community members? How do we ensure that we're bringing everyone along with us on that journey? The second thing we wanted to focus on was sustainability. How do we ensure that we create businesses that are sustainable, that will be around for a long time, and that are not just project-based or very, very short-term aspects. We want to be able to develop these businesses long-term, and we want to be able to carry these businesses forward for our youth that will eventually come in and lead these organizations. The third piece is livelihood. And livelihood is very important for us in that when we think about the wealth generation that is created, we're also creating better livelihood for our people. And so there's a greater measure to that in which we are able to create more opportunity. And when we look at our own families and we're quite proud of our relatives that are out doing very well in their careers. It creates opportunity and builds up an acknowledgement that we can do these things and that we can lead in new careers and help to create a path forward for our younger generations that are coming. So livelihood is a very important aspect of our organization. When we look at some of the best business practices of our organization, some of the things that we looked at when we created the Development Corporation, we looked at good governance. We had to have a basis of good governance. So how do we make sure that we structure the decision-making processes and having the right individuals on our board to be able to lead in capacity and be able to help lead in strategy for the organization. So we have a number of independent board members, and we also still maintain some of our leadership from our communities on our boards. And so what that does is it brings both the corporate perspective and the community perspective of understanding and acknowledging the important decision making that needs to happen when we're involved in business. And so having those aspects and that acknowledgement is very, very important for us as an organization. We, as an organization as well, we looked at a number of business cases when we were developed. We looked across Saskatchewan, we looked across Canada. We even went as far into the US and had a look at some of the nation building aspects that were being created through the Harvard business model. And we took all of the business cases and learnings, and we developed the foundation for our organization, which we've been able to grow our enterprise over the years with no investment from our nations, but a commitment to working together. The third piece and best business practice that we had was ensuring that we consulted and planned the development of our organization and worked with our nations and our life speakers as well to make sure that we understood what they wanted to see in the creation of this business. And so we needed to ensure that patience was a clear value that needed to be created in trying to create an organization that built sustainability. And I think back to my time. I've been CEO now for 5 years. And I go back to day one and think about the types of businesses that we've been able to build over the past 5 years. But I think about day one, and I think about the first few months of just sitting back and listening. It was absolutely important for me to be able to listen to what's going on in industry, what's going on in the market, what's going on with nations. Why aren't we seeing as much success as we should because of the amount of participation that we've had over the years. And so, I began to challenge some of the systems, challenge some of the policies and the processes, and started to take a step back and say, well, what do we need to do as an Indigenous organization to make sure that we're leading in our own way, based in our values, based in our commitment to how we want to see our community succeed and see our businesses succeed. So we went through a process of laying out specifically the type of relationships that we wanted and the type of outcomes we were expecting from our partners. And so that was the foundation. And so we went back to some of the businesses that we did have at the time, quite a number of joint ventures, and we began challenging our partners on, are these are some of the foundations that we want to be able to establish in these companies, and if we can't do that together, then we're going to move on as an organization. And that's exactly what we did. We did leave a number of relationships in favor of our new model that focuses on Indigenous economic impact and focuses on how we build sustainability and livelihood in the business models that we've created as an organization. So it was very, very important for us to do this. It meant, taking a few steps back, but it's taking those few steps back in order for us to lead in our own way that is going to create greater impact for our organization long term. When we think about some of the historic Indigenous engagement policies, and some of those policies are still active today, and we need to look at them differently. And so if we look at some of the Indigenous policies today or Indigenous engagement, it's focused on just merely Indigenous participation. But what we need to do is we need to move and evolve this into creating greater impact. And so when I talk about Indigenous participation, there's two factors that we typically see in, let's say a procurement process. One is, what is the legal structure, and does the nation or Indigenous individual own 51% or more? That's baseline. The second piece to that is around labor. How many Indigenous people can we put to work through that company that has just been created, or through that company that is now procuring with our organization? So that's just participation. Where we need to evolve to is we need to evolve and look deeper into how we actually engage and how non-Indigenous organizations in their procurement practices ask for more, ask for deeper commitment from both the non-Indigenous and the Indigenous partner. So, what we've established here is Indigenous. How do we create Indigenous participation? How do we create value? How do we create impact? And so we need to focus, because a lot of organizations are focusing a lot of dollars, a lot of resources, a lot of time into trying to establish these opportunities for participation. We need to take a step back and say, well, what are we really trying to accomplish as an organization? What are we trying to do? What impact are we trying to create in the community? What impact are we trying to create with Indigenous organizations? You really have to take a step back and really ask, why? And look at the participation, just merely participating in your organization versus impact. And so when you take that step back, it means we have to measure these things a little differently. We have to measure and review what these businesses are doing, because we've been in a situation where organizations have wanted to borrow our name as FHQ Developments to go and win a single contract in the market, and we see these. We see these often in major resource projects, or just major projects within our territories, where we'll have a number of companies come and they'll be knocking on the door wanting to create these new businesses. We agree to these businesses, we do the work, we get a couple bucks at the end of the day, and then put a few of our people to work. But then when that work is done, it's gone. that business is gone, that joint venture is gone, that relationship is gone. So we have to do more. We have to create sustainability. And so we need to negotiate better, and we need to challenge our partners on doing more. How do we build capacity? How do we create long-term economic livelihood for our people? We have to be able to challenge and make sure that they acknowledge how important it is for us to create that sustainability long-term. So when we think about all of this as nations, what are we trying to accomplish as organizations? I think there's three things, and I spoke about them already. It's capacity building. How are we ensuring that we are learning, that we are taking all of that capacity that our partners have and being able to perform that same type of work for ourselves? How are we ensuring our people are being trained and upskilled and are able to move vertically in their careers when those opportunities arise, to become leaders in that industry and to become leaders with that type of work that's being done? We also look at sustainability. How do we ensure that the business that we're going to create with a partner is going to be around for many years to come? Which means we have to do a bit more due diligence on the relationship that we're building with our partners. And we have to absolutely make sure that, is this a business that we want to be a part of? And can we build a long-term business together? And there are other legal structures that you can structure around these things to test out a relationship. You can have JVs to, test out a partner, make sure you understand their commitment, make sure you understand how they function. But in a lot of cases, and in our case as an organization, we focus a lot on the limited partnership structure to be able to hold our partners to more account and to actually create a business entity together that has assets, that has growth expectations, that has human assets as part of that business. And so those are more important legal structures that we need to evolve to. We go back to impact. How are we going to create impact in our community through that business relationship that we're forming? How do we hold our partners to account to make sure that they're living through on those commitments? When we think about Indigenous economic impact and how do we measure how we do this as an organization? How do we measure the capacity building? How do we measure sustainability and impact? Well, there's three things that we look at as an organization that we are focused on to ensure that we're holding our partners to account when we are, creating new limited partnerships or even in a JV structure. How are we ensuring that we're holding our partners to account? So there's three areas that we focus on. One is ownership and governance. The second is capacity development, and the third is reinvestment. So as I walk through these three areas, think about your own organizations, and perhaps you may have some partnerships, or if you're a non-Indigenous business looking to create new partnerships, make sure that you consider these areas when trying to form that relationship with that particular organization. So when we think about ownership and governance, we go back to the ownership structure. What is the actual legal structure of the entity? Does the nation own 51%? Do they own 80%? Do they own 20%? What is that overall structure of ownership? Or does the Indigenous organization have a direct ownership stake in your company? So this is, typically what we would look at in terms of acquisitions. We would acquire an equity stake with our partners, or we create a new company together, of which our organization would be a majority shareholder, and the expectation would be that we grow that new company together. You got to really think about what's being negotiated. So in a lot of our legal agreements, there are specific commitments in a section around our involvement together as partners. And so I have expectations of building capacity with our partners, making sure that, Indigenous employment is that there are targets that are set or benchmarks that we have to meet as we grow these businesses. And I know a lot of times in those scenarios, I often get the question of, well, are we trying to grow 100%, Indigenous employees inside of our organization? And, I have to stop the partners and say, no, that's not the goal at the end of the day. We still need diversity in our businesses, just like any other business. We need that diversity of thought. We need that diversity of capacity that others bring to our organization. But there needs to be a deeper commitment on how we grow our people in the organization so that we don't hit the glass ceilings that we often see with other organizations, or that there's no opportunity to develop and create new skill sets or be trained. And so we have to hold our partners to account on some of those things that are being negotiated within the legal agreements. We look at the governance structure. We built our business based on good governance, and we have to do that within these organizations. So, what is the makeup of the board? How are we putting our own people, our own community members that have the backgrounds necessary to, weigh strong thought process within that business? How do we make sure that those individuals are serving on our board? How do we ensure that some of our youth, our young people that are coming up in university, how do we ensure that they're going to be able to participate and be a part of those boards as well, so that they could build their capacity over time and become leaders from a strategy perspective of the organization? So how do we structure good governance when we do create those entities together? Some of the other things that we think about is who are the beneficiaries? For us as an organization, ultimately our 16,000 plus citizens are the beneficiaries of the businesses that we are creating. And it's like I said, it's not just about a financial transaction in creating benefit for our communities. It's creating businesses that we can be proud of. It's creating livelihood opportunities so that our people can work or aspire to work in these organizations long term, and be able to have some place where they can push their family members to eventually work for. Those are some of the benefits that our beneficiaries would see. Another piece that needs to be focused on is impact within our territory. So how when we think about the businesses that we've created, and we look at the work that we do in different territories outside of Treaty 4, let's say we're going across Saskatchewan, or we're doing work in other provinces for our companies, we try to make sure that we do take the time to acknowledge those nations that are within those territories, and how do we put those people to work with us? How do we ensure that they're sharing in the livelihood benefits of being a part of the business opportunities in those communities? So that is a really important acknowledgement that we try to make as an organization. I think we all need to acknowledge that as we grow our businesses over time. When we think about capacity development, so we're thinking about how, what does hiring look like? How are we creating the supports that are needed? How are we retaining the Indigenous talent that we have? We've been lucky enough to create, an entity that allows us to be able to do that more fluidly, in that we are constantly looking at Indigenous talent, whether they're working right now or not. We have an acknowledgement of those individuals in the market, and we try to put them to work within our organizations. But once they're there, how do we make sure that we're supporting them so that they become successful? We know we have to be a bit more patient sometimes with our own people. We know, we just came through our first national Truth and Reconciliation Day, and just acknowledging the generational trauma that has affected our people. It does sometimes creep into how we manage that talent inside of our organization. So we're asked to be a bit more patient in terms of how we develop that talent over time. So we absolutely have to be a bit more patient. We think about the training opportunities, how are our partners going to help us with training and upskilling our people. I think about, our software testing company where, just a few doors down, we have 13 Indigenous software testers being trained at the moment, and will become a part of our workforce in our company. A training that's not offered in Saskatchewan, but worked in partnership with our partners and other post-secondary institutions actually outside of the province to be able to do this. We're focused on how do we ensure that we're building those skills necessary to be able to build that capacity inside of our companies. How do we grow Indigenous leadership? We have to really focus on identifying, within our organization, who is going to step up as leaders. How can we help to foster them? How can we help to develop them and ensure that they see their own potential within the organization, and try to focus and create career paths for them within our organizations. And it's really important, and I explain this to my partners all the time, that it's important that our Indigenous talent is not just on the front lines. It's that we are middle management, supervisors, and eventually C-suite or executive. We need to see that progression, and we have that expectation as an organization. We also have to think about our future workforce. So what investments are we going to make with our partners back into our communities with our youth? How are we going to make sure our youth are aware of the opportunities in new industries that we are now exploring? How do we align their educational paths with careers that they can build with us as an organization? How do we make sure that there's brand awareness for those youth in our communities, so that they can be proud of our businesses and aspire to become leaders within those organizations? Really, really important for us to always be thinking about our future workforce of our organizations. Now, the third piece around reinvestment in community. That is, how are we supporting the things that are in our community that for us as an organization is youth. So we actually support a lot of youth-related activities, whether that's arts and culture, business and entrepreneurship, STEM. It's really important that we support these programs that are in the community, so that we're able to give greater benefit for our youth to be able to do the things that they enjoy and become leaders in some of those areas, and hopefully through that support in the community, they eventually see themselves in our organization as well. We think about the reinvestment in wealth. So this is where the value of having patience is really, really important. as an Indigenous Dev Corp. I know we want to be able to see distributions go back to the communities quickly, but in order for us to have successful businesses, we have to keep reinvesting. We have to keep putting that working capital back into the businesses so that they can continue to grow, so that we don't stifle the opportunity for their growth as a business, and that as a development corporation, that we have additional capital available to be able to continue to reinvest into new companies and help to diversify the portfolios that we have of different industries and businesses that we have. So it's really, really important to have patience and that wealth reinvestment in the organization is very, very important. And once you get to a stage where there is absolute sustainability, then we look at the opportunity to do distributions back to our communities that can help with other community programming and helping to build that sustainability. The other reinvestment is in our entrepreneurs and with our nations. So how do we ensure that we're bringing those nations and our citizens along with us? And this goes back to our economic development function in creating that Indigenous business ecosystem around us. We have to, reinvest in the resources that are necessary, build those relationships in the community, and, not so much hold hands of our people to be successful in business, but to give them the necessary tools and resources to be successful on their own. It's absolutely paramount and important that if we're going to build success in business, that we have to do this on our own. But when we have all of those necessary resources and tools and business cases and best business practices available to us, the more success I think we're going to see as organizations. So that's really, really important. When we go back to nations, so what do nations need to focus on when they're developing partnerships, when they're developing those relationships? I can't stress it enough, but acknowledging our own value systems, and as nations, we all have different value systems in how we translate that into business. How do we make sure that that is at the forefront? How do we make sure that the organizations that we're working with or non-Indigenous business that we're working with acknowledge those values? And how do we create that alignment so that we better understand one another and that we're able to accomplish the things that we're setting out to do with one another? So it's really, really important for us to bring that value system forward. The second piece would be, setting vision and building the team around you that has that same vision. It's so important to have, and we think about, do we need a whole team of Indigenous individuals to be able to carry that vision forward? Not necessarily. We need people that are aligned with our value systems. Just like in our businesses, the people are really important. The work culture that we're building is very, very important. And so how do we make sure that we have the right people around the table that are helping us to move this forward? It shouldn't be just the Indigenous partner that is speaking on behalf of our Indigenous value system. Our partners should have that capability of being able to explain themselves and how they see themselves in our value systems. That only creates an even stronger business and a stronger commitment to the businesses that we create with one another. So I think that's absolutely paramount in having not only the right value system in business, but the right value system in people to help lead that. And I know as Indigenous organizations, we place a very high value on relationships. when we have our gut feelings about, is this going to be something that's good for us or not? Am I being dragged along, or is this individual or organization working alongside us and taking the time to listen and really understand who we are as an organization? The third piece would be around developing a process that helps to navigate the type of partners that you want. So this goes back to, what is your due diligence process? So there's, due diligence processes and how we navigate a relationship from a business perspective, and is that business going to be successful? What are the opportunities? What are the strengths of it? What are the risks that we would take with that type of business venture? Those are all our typical due diligence. But when we look at partnerships, it's a little different. It does absolutely require more patience, and it absolutely requires more commitment to negotiations. And I think of some of the negotiations that we've went through with our partners, that have sometimes doubted our capability of growing our businesses quickly. We eventually had to just ask them to trust us, trust our process, trust our business model, and we will demonstrate the success that we speak about as an organization. I know, some of the questions that, I would get sometimes from partners or organizations looking to do business with our organization is, well, if I do business with you, can we just limit it to the territory that you're in, within Treaty 4 territory? And, we have to tell them to take a step back and think about that for themselves. Would you go and create a business that only operates within a certain geographical territory? Well, you wouldn't, because you would quickly find out that there's very limited opportunities within that territory. And yes, there may be some opportunities today, but over time, it's going to go up and down in terms of the types of opportunities that you can create. So how do we ensure that, we're thinking bigger picture, and we're thinking, much larger opportunities in the market, and, and let's not be so finite on just focusing on the quick wins. Let's focus on how do we develop strategy and business opportunity long term, and how do we look at other capacity development opportunities for new lines of business and in the business we're creating together. And so, we have that opportunity to now open that door and explore opportunities far beyond our traditional territories that we sometimes allow our non-Indigenous partners to box us into. So you really have to push. So that's just one example. Or there may be examples of developing an Indigenous talent. Sometimes the expectation is, well, how do we get these people to work today? Well, that's not necessarily so. If we have limited Indigenous talent in certain territories, we don't have that opportunity to just go and scoop up as much Indigenous people as we can, and then expect them to do a good job in the business. It's patience. We have to have patience again. And we have to take a step back and say, how do we find the right people? How do we train them and develop them to be in the right roles that we need? And then, how do we support and grow them within our organization? So, we have to take that step back sometimes and make sure that we acknowledge those. But it should be that, we're talking equally as partners at the table, and that we're ensuring that we're bringing that voice to our Indigenous participation on projects. One of the other really interesting things, and one thing I'm very, very proud of, and working with the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce has been the creation of our Indigenous Engagement Charter. It's the first of its kind in Canada, and I think back to why did we want to do this as a chamber? And we're talking about partnerships, we're talking about relationship building between nations and non-Indigenous business. And that was the premise. What we said was, we keep getting these situations where organizations are telling us, well, I don't know how to work with a nation, I don't know how to work with a development corporation, but I want to create an impact as a business. And so what can I do? What do I need to do to be able to successfully create those relationships? And so the work that was done was we created a 90-day task force. I co-chaired, and we brought many business owners that had, both from the small, medium-sized enterprises to large corporate. They all had a part within the task force to challenge the charter and to ensure that we had a deeper understanding of, what are some of those barriers, what are some of the things that resources that are needed. And, we successfully created an Indigenous Engagement Charter in a 90-day period. It was quite interesting going through that process, but what we wanted to ensure by having this charter in place was that non-Indigenous businesses now, they can't have an excuse for not engaging. There are resources there that are free and that help to build knowledge and give access to the tools and resources that those organizations can use. And whether you're a small business in a very, very rural part of Saskatchewan to a large corporate in Regina or Saskatoon, there are things that you can do, and there are ways in which you can engage and do it and customize it to what resources you have as an organization. So we didn't say that there's a one-size-fits-all to this. What we're acknowledging is that, take a look at yourself as an organization, as a business, and say, well, what can I do? What are the little things that I can start with, and where do I want to get to? And so there's actual plans in place that, will be reviewed with the business and our Director of Indigenous Engagement. And, when you're struggling to find a resource, when you're struggling to try to make a commitment, but or don't know where to look for the solutions, our Director of Indigenous Engagement is there to help you and to help walk you through some of that process. And I think about before we even get into going down this path, what's really, really critical in going down the path first is to educate. And so we look at the training opportunities that happen in Indigenous engagement or Indigenous awareness training for organizations, and quite proud of how many people from the business community that the Sask Chamber has been able to train and go through and have some of those tough conversations and learnings about the Indigenous awareness in our communities. But that's helping to set a foundation of being a bit more open-minded about what we can and can't do as a business community. And so all of these resources are there. So from an engagement perspective for non-Indigenous businesses, this is an opportunity for you to utilize that resource and to help build your relationship in community. So I absolutely would recommend taking the opportunity to look at those resources and implement them into your organization. The other piece I know that we've been working on as a chamber for our business community has been around, obviously, our National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. The team did a great job in providing resources, and it wasn't just our Saskatchewan businesses that were accessing the resources there. We actually had quite a number of organizations from across Canada accessing those resources. So, there's really is no excuse. The resources are there, so take advantage of them. And if you do want to become a charter member and make a real commitment and have somebody hold you accountable to the commitments that you are willing to make as a business, that's what the charter is there to do also. We all know that sometimes we need a coach, and that's the resources that are created through that program. So very, very proud of the work that has been done there, and very proud of how that's going to open the doors to creating more opportunity. Well, that's the end of my presentation, but I don't see any questions. So I guess, to touch on some other topics, I know some things that, I think, the business community and our nations need to be aware of, and that I hope that more nations are doing this, but, we really need to challenge our procurement processes and the measurements that are used. We talked about the participation versus the impact model. We need to continue to push for the procurement practices to change and the policies to change, so that we are measuring that differently. You can't measure an organization that is very committed to community versus an organization that is committed to just collecting a dollar at the end of the day. We need to be able to do more. And, we strongly believe that when we are being more impactful for our communities, there's going to be so much more benefit that we're able to create, and so much more economic prosperity that we're able to share with our nations. And it's not just, our nations that benefit in our business success. It's actually it's our community in general. I know I've brought this up to the chamber over the years, and even before I became CEO, and I always explained how our Indigenous organizations create greater impact in our community, and there's actually greater return to the Saskatchewan economy through the Indigenous-led business models. I've always said this and said that there was a multiplier, but never had the opportunity to demonstrate that until just within this past year, when we completed the work around an economic impact calculator to actually demonstrate how much more impact our FHQ business model is creating in the community, versus just Saskatchewan business in general. I think if we were to go back to SIMSA and some of the work that they did, some of the research, they were demonstrating the economic impact of organizations that were coming to do business in Saskatchewan. So any business from outside of Saskatchewan doing business here, winning contracts, it was 39 cents on the dollar. That goes back to Saskatchewan economic impact. And if we looked at local suppliers within Saskatchewan, it was $1.51 back to the Saskatchewan economy. And when I compared our Indigenous economic impact model for FHQ Developments, we were able to demonstrate, based on the industry, $2.50 and up to $4 of economic impact. So it's very, very considerable. So if we're winning a $100,000 contract today, $250,000 worth of economic impact is going to happen in Saskatchewan. So that's why we speak about impact and why it's so important. And it's because of the structure, it's because of the governance and capacity structure, the capacity development, the reinvestment, all of these things. When we think of ourselves as nations, we're not taking our dollars and going out and reinvesting outside of Saskatchewan. And that's why the dollar sticks around here so long and it creates even more of an impact. We're not investing outside of Saskatchewan. We're keeping it here, and we're creating benefit within our own community, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So we really need to rethink our entire procurement system in trying to demonstrate impact versus, what's the lowest cost that I can pay for a product or service. If we think more like economic development corporations and think about the impacts we're going to create in our own community and the impact and livelihood that we're going to create, I think that's a much better picture to be able to focus on and be able to create so much more opportunity for us as a province and as nations. So with that, I'd like to I don't have any questions, so I just want to thank everyone at the Lloydminster Chamber of Commerce for allowing me to come and share some of my knowledge and experience in working in this area and trying to build a better Saskatchewan and build more opportunity for our nations. So thank you again, and I'll turn it back over to you.